I'm Ella, 29, and I never imagined my father would betray me like this. 3 years ago, my mother passed away, leaving me our family home. Out of love, I let Dad and his new wife Natalie move in with me. Everything was fine until their gender reveal party, when Natalie announced, "We need more space for our real family." The shock froze me as Dad nodded in agreement. What they didn't realize, it was my house. Let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to see how I gave them 30 days to pack their things and leave. Growing up, I was incredibly close with both my parents, but especially my mum. We shared everything from baking recipes to late-night talks about life and dreams. Our home was filled with laughter, warmth, and the beautiful garden my mother tended with care. Every corner held memories of family game nights, holiday celebrations, and ordinary moments that became precious over time. When Mum was diagnosed with cancer 4 years ago, our world shattered. The 18 months that followed were a brutal journey of treatments, hospital stays, and watching her strength fade. Dad and I took turns caring for her, but the illness progressed relentlessly. 3 years ago, she passed away in the home she loved, surrounded by family photos and the spring flowers Dad had brought in from her garden. The grief was overwhelming. I took a leave from my graphic design job just to process everything. Dad fell into a deep depression, barely leaving his bedroom for weeks. Our family home, once vibrant with Mum's energy, felt hollow, despite the familiar surroundings. A few months after the funeral, Mum's will was processed, yes. She left the house to me along with some savings. She had always worried about my future security, and this was her way of ensuring I'd always have a safe place. I was touched by her foresight, but would have traded it all to have her back. Dad continued struggling with his grief. His job performance suffered, and he started attending a grief support group at the community centre. That's where he met Natalie. She was a few years younger than him, divorced, and according to Dad, understanding of his pain in a way others weren't. Their relationship progressed quickly. Within 3 months, Dad was smiling again, going out for dinners and talking about future plans. I was genuinely happy for him. The shadow that had followed him since Mum's passing seemed to be lifting. When Dad introduced us, Natalie seemed kind enough. She complimented the house, asked questions about my graphic design work, and brought a homemade casserole that Dad raved about. But something felt off about her interest in our family photos and heirlooms. She asked detailed questions about the house's layout and which rooms were used for what. At the time, I dismissed my unease as adjustment to seeing Dad with someone new. 6 months into their relationship, Dad approached me with a request. His apartment lease was ending, and he wondered if he could move in temporarily while looking for a new place. Natalie's lease was also up soon, and they were discussing moving in together, but hadn't found the right place. "It would just be for a couple months, Ella," he promised, eyes hopeful. "It would help us save for a bigger place." How could I refuse? This was my father who had supported me my entire life, and truthfully, the house felt too quiet sometimes. I agreed, setting up the guest room for him and clearing some closet space. Within weeks, subtle changes began happening around the house. Dad's few boxes of belongings expanded as he brought more things from storage. Natalie started staying over frequently, then nearly every night. My routine of peaceful morning coffee on the patio was interrupted by their breakfast conversations. My home office, where I worked remotely 3 days a week, suddenly felt less private. My best friend Jordan noticed the shift during our weekly movie nights. "They're getting pretty comfortable here," she observed after Natalie had rearranged the living room furniture without asking me. "Have they mentioned when they're looking at apartments?" I realized they hadn't mentioned house hunting in weeks. When I casually brought it up over dinner, Dad and Natalie exchanged glances. "Actually, sweetheart," Dad said, reaching for Natalie's hand, "we have some news. We're engaged." The diamond ring sparkled on Natalie's finger as she beamed. I congratulated them, pushing aside the nagging feeling that something bigger was happening. Dad looked happier than he had since Mum died. Wasn't that what mattered most? "We're thinking a small ceremony in the backyard would be perfect," Natalie added. "Your mum's garden would be the most beautiful setting." I nodded, trying to ignore how she referred to my mother's beloved garden as if it were already hers to use. That night, I stared at the ceiling, wondering what Mum would think of all this. Was I honouring her memory by supporting Dad's new relationship, or failing her by letting another woman stake claim to the home she'd lovingly created? The next morning, I found Natalie measuring the guest room walls. "Just thinking about paint colours," she said brightly. "This room gets such lovely morning light." I realised then that temporary had become permanent without anyone asking me. The tension started small but grew steadily after Natalie officially moved in following their engagement. My daily routines became disrupted by her presence. The kitchen, once my peaceful morning sanctuary, was now filled with her meal prep containers and specialized cooking gadgets. She'd wake up earlier than me just to claim the space, leaving me to work around her breakfast smoothie production. The first real conflict came when I discovered she had packed away some of Mum's decorative plates that had always hung in the dining room. When I asked about them, Natalie gave a dismissive wave. "They're just so dated, sweetie. I put them in the attic for safekeeping. I found these modern ones on sale that matched the kitchen so much better." I stood there staring at the sleek geometric plates that had replaced Mom's hand-painted flowers. Dad walked in during this tense moment. "Everything okay?" he asked, glancing between us. "Natalie put away Mom's plates without asking me," I said, trying to keep my voice level. Dad sighed. "Those old things. Honestly, Ella, I think it's time we updated some of the decor around here. Your mother would understand." His casual dismissal of something that had been part of our family meals for decades stung worse than Natalie's action. I retreated to my office, the one space that remained fully mine, though even that had shrinking boundaries. My work performance began to suffer. As a graphic designer for a marketing agency, I needed quiet concentration and creative energy. Now I found myself constantly distracted by Natalie's loud phone conversations or her knocking on my door with trivial questions during my work hours. "Sorry to interrupt, but do you think this fabric would look good for curtains in the living room?" became a common interruption despite my repeated explanations about my work schedule. My boss Amanda noticed the change during our video meetings. After one particularly scattered presentation, she stayed on the call after others had left. "Everything all right at home, Ella? You seem distracted lately." I confided in her about the situation. Amanda, a woman in her 50s, who'd navigated her share of family conflicts, listened sympathetically. "Have you considered speaking with a financial advisor about protecting your asset? If the house is truly yours, you need to establish clear boundaries." Following her advice, I made an appointment with a financial advisor who specialized in inheritance matters. She confirmed what I already knew legally. The house was completely mine, but recommended documenting the current living arrangement in writing, including any financial contributions from Dad and Natalie. "Even family situations can get complicated," she warned. "Best to have everything clear from the beginning." When I broached the subject of rent contributions with Dad and Natalie, the conversation quickly turned uncomfortable. "We're family, Ella," Dad said, frowning. "Your mother wouldn't have wanted us nickel and diming each other." "We're happy to contribute," Natalie added smoothly. "But we're saving for our future right now, and we do help with groceries and utilities." Their token contributions hardly offset the impact of having 2 additional adults in the house full-time. More troubling were the small items of Mum's that kept disappearing: jewelry from her dresser books, from her collection, framed photos replaced with new ones of Dad and Natalie. Jordan became increasingly concerned during her visits. "You're being too accommodating," she said during one of our coffee dates. "This is your house. You need to set some serious boundaries before they completely take over." I knew she was right, but confrontation had never been my strength. Mom had been the assertive one in our family, while Dad and I tended toward keeping the peace. One evening, Aunt Kathy, Mum's sister, came for dinner. She immediately noticed the changes to the house and pulled me aside while Natalie was showing Dad something on her phone. "What's going on here, Ella?" she whispered. "This doesn't feel like Susan's home anymore." Tears sprang to my eyes at someone finally acknowledging what I'd been feeling. "They've just made themselves at home," I said quietly. "I don't know how to reclaim my space without hurting Dad." Aunt Kathy squeezed my hand. "Susan left this house to you for a reason. She'd want you to protect what's yours. Your mother was too smart to not see something like this coming." Her words resonated deeply. Mum had always been the pragmatic one, planning ahead while maintaining her generous spirit. She wouldn't have wanted me feeling like a guest in my own home. The final straw came during a family dinner when Natalie casually mentioned expanding our family nest. "What do you mean?" I asked, fork paused midway to my mouth. Natalie and Dad exchanged meaningful glances. "Nothing definite yet," Dad said quickly. "Just thinking about the future." Later that night, I overheard them in their room, voices carrying through the thin walls. "We should wait to tell her," Dad was saying. "Ella's been sensitive lately about changes to the house. But we'll need to start preparing," Natalie insisted. That office of hers would make a perfect nursery with the morning light. I stood frozen in the hallway, the implications clear. They weren't just staying temporarily anymore, they were planning a complete takeover of my home and my life. The pregnancy announcement came during a surprise gathering Natalie organized at our house. She had invited extended family members, including Dad's brother Uncle Mark and his wife Aunt Kathy, and some of their friends from the grief support group. I had no idea what was happening until everyone was seated in the living room and Natalie stood up holding Dad's hand. We wanted all our loved ones here for this special moment. She began, her free hand moving to rest on her stomach. Thomas and I are expecting a baby. The room erupted in cheers and congratulations. Dad's eyes filled with tears as he hugged Natalie. I'm going to be a father again, he said, his voice breaking with emotion. My reaction was complicated. I was genuinely happy for my father finding joy again, but simultaneously felt a growing unease about what this meant for my living situation. I managed a smile and gave them both hugs, offering sincere congratulations. I'm going to be a big sister, I said, trying to focus on the positive aspect. Natalie's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Well, half-sister technically, but yes, you'll be in the baby's life, of course. That subtle distinction stung more than it should have. Throughout the celebration, I noticed how Natalie seemed to direct pregnancy questions and attention away from me, almost creating a barrier between me and the excitement. After most guests had left, Natalie cornered me in the kitchen as I was cleaning up. Ella, I wanted to talk to you about something important, she said, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes calculating. Sure, what's up? I asked, drying my hands on a towel. Now that we're expanding our family, we've been thinking about space. Your office really would make the perfect nursery. It gets that beautiful morning light. It's close to our bedroom and it's away from the noise of the living room. I felt my stomach drop. My office. But that's where I work 3 days a week. I need that space. Natalie sighed dramatically. I thought you'd be more understanding. This is about family, Ella. Surely your work can be done anywhere. The dining room, perhaps? Or you could rent a small office space nearby. Before I could respond, Dad walked in. Everything okay in here? Natalie immediately turned to him. I was just telling Ella about our nursery ideas, but she seems reluctant to give up her office space. Dad frowned slightly. Honey, we do need to think about what's best for the baby. Family needs have to come first now. That phrase, family needs, hit me like a slap. Wasn't I family too? The implication that my needs were secondary to their new unit was clear. I need some air, I managed to say, grabbing my keys and phone. I drove straight to Jordan's apartment, tears blurring my vision. Jordan listened as I poured out everything the pregnancy, the nursery demands, the subtle ways I was being pushed out of my own home. They're acting like it's their house, I concluded, accepting the glass of wine she offered. Because you've let them, Jordan said gently but firmly. Ella, it's time to talk to a lawyer. This is your house. Your mother left it to you, not your dad, and certainly not his new wife. The next morning, instead of going home, I called a real estate lawyer recommended by Amanda. The consultation was eye-opening. You have every legal right to establish boundaries, including asking them to leave, the lawyer explained. As the sole owner, you control who lives in your property. What really shocked me was discovering through some social media searches that Natalie had been posting pictures of the house with captions like, preparing our family home for the newest member, and so blessed to have this beautiful house for our growing family. There was never any mention that it was actually my house, where they were living as guests. Even worse, I overheard conversations from mutual acquaintances that Dad and Natalie had been referring to it as their house when talking to others. The narrative they'd created erased my ownership entirely. Despite the growing tension, I decided to attend the gender reveal party they had planned. I wanted to support Dad and maintain family harmony if possible. I prepared myself to have a firm but compassionate conversation about boundaries after the celebration. The day before the party, I came home early from work and froze in the hallway when I heard Dad and Natalie talking in the kitchen. Once Ella moves out, we can convert her bedroom too, Natalie was saying. It would make a perfect playroom connected to the nursery. Don't you think we should ask her first about these plans? Dad responded, though his tone lacked real conviction. Thomas, be realistic. She's 29. She should be finding her own place anyway, not living in the same house as her father and stepmother. This works out better for everyone. The house is too big for just her, and we need the space for our family. I backed away, silently heart-pounding. They weren't just planning to take my office, they expected me to move out completely. From my own house. The house my mother had specifically left to me. That night, I barely slept mentally, preparing for what would come after the gender reveal party. I made calls to both my financial advisor and the lawyer, putting things in motion. Whatever happened at the party, I was done being pushed around in my own home. The day of the gender reveal arrived with perfect spring weather. Natalie had transformed our backyard with elaborate decorations, blue and pink balloons tied to every available surface, a professionally printed banner reading, "He or she come see what baby will be," and tables laden with color-coordinated snacks and drinks. I helped with the setup, placing plates and arranging food platters while swallowing my growing resentment. Natalie's parents arrived early, her mother immediately taking charge of the kitchen as if it were her own. More relatives and friends filtered in, including Dad's colleagues and several couples from their church. "Isn't this exciting?" Aunt Kathy said, finding me arranging cupcakes. "Though it's quite the production, isn't it?" "Your mother would have gone for something more understated." I nodded, grateful for the subtle acknowledgement that this extravaganza wasn't in keeping with our family's usual style. Dad was beaming with pride, accepting congratulations, and slapping backs with a lightness I hadn't seen in years. Despite everything, seeing his happiness tugged at my heart. He caught my eye across the yard and gave me a warm smile that momentarily transported me back to simpler times. At the designated hour, everyone gathered around the large black box Natalie and Dad stood behind. A countdown began, led by Natalie's enthusiastic father, and then the lid was lifted, releasing dozens of blue balloons into the clear sky. "It's a boy!" Everyone cheered as blue confetti cannons exploded. Dad wiped tears from his eyes and embraced Natalie. Camera flashes captured their joy from every angle. I clapped along with everyone else, maintaining my supportive smile, even as I felt increasingly disconnected from the celebration. After the reveal, Natalie clinked a glass for attention. I expected a simple thank you speech, but what followed changed everything. "Thomas and I are so blessed to be welcoming our son into the world in 5 months. She began, one hand resting on her slight baby bump. "And we're equally blessed to have this beautiful family home to raise him in." My spine stiffened at her wording, but I kept my expression neutral. "Which brings me to some exciting news," she continued. "We're going to be converting the front office into the perfect nursery for baby Thomas Jr. Guests applauded while I stood frozen. She hadn't even discussed this with me since that first conversation. But Natalie wasn't finished. "And since we're going to need more space for our growing family, we'll be expanding into the main bedroom suite as well." Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew that was my bedroom, the master suite I'd inherited along with the house. Dad stepped forward, placing his arm around Natalie's shoulders. "What Natalie means is that we're going to be making some changes to accommodate our family's needs." Natalie nodded, her smile never wavering as she delivered the knockout punch. "We need more space for our real family." The emphasis on real hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several guests looked uncomfortably in my direction, realizing the implication. Dad didn't contradict her or even seem to notice the insult. He simply squeezed her shoulder affectionately. "Ella understands the importance of family, don't you, sweetie?" Natalie directed at me, her eyes challenging. All eyes turned to me. The silence stretched as I struggled to form words through my shock. This public ambush had been deliberately planned. Aunt Kathy broke the tension, stepping forward. "I think we all need to remember whose house this actually is," she said pointedly. Natalie's smile tightened. "We're all family here. No need to get technical about such things." The celebration awkwardly resumed, but I felt numb as I mechanically went through the motions of serving cake and accepting congratulations on becoming a sister. Later, I found myself alone in the kitchen, gripping the counter for support when Natalie entered. "You're being awfully quiet," she remarked, arranging leftover cupcakes on a plate. "You had no right to make those announcements," I said, keeping my voice low. "This is my house, Natalie. My mother left it to me, not to Dad, and certainly not to you." Her pleasant mask slipped for a moment, revealing something cold beneath. "Don't be selfish, Ella. Your father and I are starting a family. We need this space more than you do." "That's not for you to decide," I countered. Dad walked in, catching the tension immediately. "What's going on?" "Your daughter is being unreasonable about the nursery arrangements," Natalie said expertly, making her voice tremble slightly. "Ella," Dad sighed, looking disappointed. "I thought you'd be more supportive. We need space for family now." "I am family." I said, the hurt evident in my voice. At least I thought I was. "You know what I mean," he replied dismissively. "A baby needs proper space. You're an adult. You can adjust. Or find your own place," Natalie added with false sweetness. "It would probably be best for everyone." I looked between them, suddenly seeing the situation with perfect clarity. They had been planning this takeover for months, gradually pushing me out of my own home. And my father, the man who had once promised to always protect me, was complicit. Without another word, I grabbed my purse and keys and walked out the front door, tears blurring my vision. In my car, I finally broke down sobs, racking my body as the full weight of the betrayal crashed over me. Through my tears, I dialed Jordan's number. "They want me out," I managed to say when she answered. "They said they need space for their real family." "Come over right now," Jordan said firmly. "And Ella, remember whose name is on the deed to that house." As I drove away from my childhood home, now feeling like alien territory, I made my decision. This wasn't just about an office or a room anymore. It was about standing up for myself and for what my mother had wanted for me. If they wanted space so badly, they could find their own. The morning after the gender reveal disaster, I woke up on Jordan's couch with swollen eyes and a clear sense of purpose. After a strong cup of coffee and Jordan's unwavering support, I called the real estate lawyer I'd consulted earlier. "I need to formally evict 2 people from my property." I explained the words, feeling surreal as I spoke them. "My father and his pregnant wife." The lawyer, Mrs. Rivera, didn't sound surprised. "Family situations can be the most difficult," she said sympathetically. "But legally, this is straightforward. As the sole owner, you have every right to determine who lives in your home." We scheduled an immediate appointment, and by noon I was sitting in her office with all my property documents spread before us. "The house was left to you exclusively," Mrs. Rivera confirmed, reviewing my mother's will. "There are no conditions or co-tenancy rights. Your father has been living there as a guest, not a co-owner." "What's the process?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "We'll prepare a formal 30-day notice to vacate. In most cases like this, once people realize you're serious, they make arrangements to leave without further legal action." Before returning to the house, I stopped by my office to speak with Amanda. Her understanding exceeded my expectations. "Take whatever time you need," she said. "And if you need legal support, our company attorneys can consult. What they're doing is unacceptable. I feel terrible about my dad," I confessed. "Am I being selfish?" Amanda's response was exactly what I needed to hear. "Protecting what's rightfully yours isn't selfish, Ella. Your mother made her wishes clear. She wanted you to have security. Don't let anyone take that from you, even family." With the formal notice in my bag and renewed confidence, I returned home in the late afternoon. The house was quiet, most of the gender reveal decorations cleared away. I walked through the front door, noting how even the entryway had been transformed with Natalie's oversized mirror and artificial plants replacing Mom's simple, elegant decor. I found them in the living room, Dad reading, while Natalie scrolled through her phone. They both looked up with surprise when I entered. "Where did you disappear to yesterday?" Dad asked. "We had guests asking about you." "I needed some space to think," I replied, remaining standing while they lounged comfortably on the couch Mum had chosen years ago. "I see you finished cleaning up." Natalie nodded. "Everyone loved the reveal. We got so many gifts already." She gestured to the pile of blue-wrapped packages in the corner. "And I've started measuring your office for the crib and changing table. The furniture gets delivered next week." The casual way she discussed taking over my workspace strengthened my resolve. "Actually, that won't be happening," I said calmly. "I've been doing some thinking and I've made a decision about the house." Dad put down his book, giving me his full attention. "What do you mean?" "I mean that this is my house. Mom left it to me and I've allowed you both to live here out of love and generosity. But after yesterday, it's clear that my generosity is being taken for granted." Natalie's eyes narrowed. "Is this about the nursery? We can discuss the details if you're upset about the color scheme or something." "This isn't about decor," I said firmly. "This is about respect and boundaries. You announced plans for my home without consulting me. And more importantly, you made it clear that I'm not considered part of your real family." Dad stood up, his expression darkening. "You're overreacting, Ella. Natalie didn't mean anything by that comment." "I think she did," I countered. "And your silence when she said it spoke volumes." I reached into my bag and withdrew the envelope containing the formal notice. "I've spoken with a lawyer. As the legal owner of this property, I'm giving you both 30 days' notice to find alternative accommodation." The shock on their faces would have been satisfying if the situation weren't so painful. Dad took the envelope with trembling hands. "You can't be serious," he whispered. "This is my home too. Your mother would never have wanted this." "Mum wanted me to have security and stability," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "She left the house to me for a reason." "This is ridiculous," Natalie exclaimed, her facade crumbling. "We're having a baby. You would put your own father and your pregnant stepmother out on the street. What kind of person does that?" "I'm not putting you on the street. I'm giving you 30 days to find a new place, which is more than fair, considering you were planning to take over my bedroom without even asking me." Dad opened the envelope, scanning the formal language with disbelief. Ella, we can talk about this. There's no need for legal documents between family. There is when family doesn't respect boundaries, I said, surprising myself with my firmness. You've been living here rent-free for months. You have savings. You can find a nice place for your new family. This is your hormones talking, Dad said to Natalie, who had started crying dramatically. Ella doesn't mean this. She'll calm down. It was so typical of him to attribute my actions to someone else, as though I couldn't possibly be acting independently. I do mean it, I stated clearly. The notice period starts today, April 15th to May 15th. And if we refuse to leave, Natalie challenged, tears suddenly gone, then I'll proceed with legal eviction proceedings, which would become part of public record. I don't want to do that, but I will, if necessary. Dad's expression shifted from shock to anger. I never thought you'd turn against your own family like this, after everything I've done for you. His guilt tactics might have worked months ago, but not now. I'm not turning against family. I'm establishing boundaries that should have been in place from the beginning. If you do this, he said, voice low and threatening, don't expect to be part of this baby's life. Don't expect to be part of my life anymore. The threat hurt more than I wanted to admit, but I stood my ground. That's your choice to make. My choice is to reclaim my home. I turned and walked upstairs to my bedroom, legs shaking but spine straight. Within an hour, I had packed essentials into 2 suitcases. Jordan had already offered her guest room until things settled down. I couldn't stay in the house during this transition. It would be too toxic. As I carried my luggage downstairs, Dad was waiting at the bottom, his eyes pleading. Please don't do this, Ella. We can work something out. I gave you both chances to work things out, I replied sadly. Many chances. But you chose to sideline me in my own home. The 30 days stands. That night at Jordan's apartment, messages flooded my phone from Dad, Natalie, and even some family members who'd heard their version of events. I turned off notifications and focused on breathing. For the first time in months, despite the pain, I felt like I was standing up for myself the way Mum would have wanted. The next morning, Jordan raised her coffee mug in a toast. To taking back your power, she said with a supportive smile. Your mum would be proud. Despite the heartache, I knew she was right. The 30 days that followed were a turbulent mix of guilt, relief, and anxiety. I temporarily moved in with Jordan, giving Dad and Natalie space to pack, while still regularly checking on my property. The initial shock of my decision gave way to various tactics from both of them. Dad tried guilt first. Your mother would be heartbroken to see you treating me this way. He texted on day 3. I didn't respond, knowing Mom would actually be heartbroken to see how he had allowed Natalie to erase her presence from our family home. Then came anger. After everything I sacrificed for you growing up, this is how you repay me, he demanded during one of my brief visits to collect more clothes. By throwing your father out on the street. I'm not throwing you out on the street, I repeated calmly. I'm asking you to find your own place, which is what adults typically do, especially when starting a new family. Natalie alternated between tearful pleas about the baby's well-being and cold fury. She enlisted her parents, who left me a voicemail calling me heartless and jealous of their happiness. Some of Dad's family members took their side too, sending messages about family loyalty and selfishness. But others surprised me with their support. Uncle Mark, Dad's younger brother, called me directly. I wanted you to know not everyone thinks you're wrong here, Ella, he said. Susan left that house to you specifically, not to Thomas. She was a smart woman who knew exactly what she was doing. His support meant more than he could know. Even more surprising was his next revelation. There's something you should know, Uncle Mark continued hesitantly. Thomas and Natalie have been having financial problems. He took some major losses on investments last year, and Natalie has significant debt from her previous marriage. I think they saw your house as a solution to their problems. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Their reluctance to contribute financially, their increasing takeover of the space, their rush to establish the narrative that it was their family home. They had never intended to find their own place. A week into the notice period, I returned to the house to water Mum's garden plants and discovered something disturbing. While looking for a watering can in the hall closet, I spotted a familiar jewelry box tucked behind some towels. It was my mother's antique wooden jewelry case, which had disappeared months ago when Natalie claimed she'd never seen it. My hands shaking, I opened it to find Mom's pearl earrings, her silver locket with my baby picture, and other sentimental pieces I'd been told were probably misplaced during cleaning. They hadn't been misplaced, they'd been deliberately hidden. Further exploration revealed more of Mum's missing keepsakes, secreted away in Natalie's closet. Her hand-embroidered table runner, the crystal bowl that had been a wedding gift, even framed family photos I'd been looking for. It was as if Natalie had been systematically collecting pieces of my mother to hide away, gradually erasing her presence from the home she'd loved. I took photos documenting everything and then confronted them that evening. Dad seemed genuinely shocked when I showed him the hidden items. I had no idea, he said, looking at Natalie with the first signs of doubt I'd seen. You told me Ella must have moved these things. Natalie's response was a magnificent display of deflection. I was just protecting them from getting damaged during all the changes around here, she insisted. They're such special items they should be carefully stored. In a closet behind your winter boots, I asked pointedly. Instead of displayed in the home where they belong, for the first time I saw Dad's confidence in Natalie waver. He stared at the jewellery box, running his finger over the inlaid pattern my mother had loved. Susan loved these pieces, he said softly. She wore those pearls to every special occasion. And now they'll be returned to where they belong, I said firmly, gathering the items, along with everything else that was stored for safekeeping. Natalie's composure finally cracked completely. This is ridiculous. I try to keep a few old things safe, and suddenly I'm the villain. Meanwhile, she's kicking out her family during a pregnancy. She turned to Dad, expecting his automatic support. But Dad was still looking at Mum's jewellery box, something shifting behind his eyes. Why didn't you tell me you had these things, Natalie? You knew Ella had been looking for them. It was the first time he'd questioned her directly, and Natalie didn't handle it well. She launched into a tearful tirade about being unappreciated, about sacrificing for a blended family, about hormones and stress. But her calculated manipulation was finally visible, even to Dad. Later, as I was leaving with my mother's recovered belongings, Dad followed me to my car. I had no idea about the hidden items, Ella, I swear. There's a lot you haven't noticed, I replied, not unkindly, but the 30-day notice still stands. I understand, he said, surprising me. We found an apartment. It's not what we wanted, but it will do until we figure things out. It was the first acknowledgement that they were actually taking my eviction seriously, and it brought a mix of relief and sadness. Despite everything, this was still my father, the man who had taught me to ride a bike and checked under my bed for monsters. I'm glad you're making arrangements, I said, unable to offer more than that. As the move-out date approached, the tension in the house became increasingly palpable. Boxes appeared in hallways, furniture was tagged for moving, and Natalie retreated into cold silence whenever I was present. The nursery items that had been delivered were repacked for their new location. The night before the deadline, I stayed at the house to help finalize the move. Dad and I managed moments of civility as we worked hints of our old relationship, occasionally breaking through the strain. Your mother would have handled this better than me, he admitted as we taped a box of kitchen items. She always saw things clearly. She wanted security for both of us, I said, just in different ways. He nodded, a glimmer of understanding finally showing. I got lost after she died. Natalie seemed like a lifeline. It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement, and for now that had to be enough. The following day, I watched as the moving truck pulled away with their belongings. Natalie hadn't spoken a word to me, entering and exiting with dramatic sighs and pointed glares. Dad gave me an awkward side hug before following her to their car. We'll talk soon, he said, uncertainty clouding his features. As their car disappeared down the street, I stood alone on the porch of my reclaimed home. The victory felt hollow in many ways, tinged with loss and family fracture. But beneath that was something else, a sense of standing firmly in my own power, honouring my mother's wishes and refusing to be erased from my own story. That night, as I walked through the half-empty rooms, I found a sonogram picture left on the kitchen counter with a note in Natalie's handwriting. I hope you're happy knowing your brother will grow up without a proper home. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I being selfish? Should I have found another solution I called Jordan, who came over immediately with a bottle of wine and unwavering support? That's emotional manipulation, plain and simple, she said after reading the note. They have a home, it's just not your home anymore. Big difference. As we sat on the porch swing that had been my mother's favourite spot, I felt the first real sense of peace in months. The house was mine again, just as Mum had intended. The path forward with Dad remained uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I was standing firmly on ground that belonged to me in every sense. 1 month after Dad and Natalie moved out, the house began to feel like mine again. I spent weekends repainting rooms that had been taken over with Natalie's preferred beige and grey colour scheme. My mother's garden, which had been neglected during the conflict, became my therapy as I pruned, weeded, and planted new flowers. Each bloom felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of space. The first weekend of my ownership recommitment, I invited Jordan and a few close friends to help restore Mum's touches that had been removed or hidden away. We rehung her hand-painted plates in the dining room, placed her crystal vases back on the mantelpiece, and restored family photos to their rightful places. "Your mum had beautiful taste," my co-worker Lisa commented as we arranged Mum's collection of vintage teacups in the china cabinet. "Everything feels warm and loved." That was exactly it, loved. My mother had created a home filled with meaning and history. Natalie had tried to transform it into a showplace that erased our family's past. Reclaiming these spaces wasn't just about decoration, it was about honouring Mum's memory and the legacy she'd wanted to preserve for me. My home office, which had nearly become a nursery, underwent the most dramatic transformation. I invested in a proper desk, ergonomic chair, and organised shelving system. What had once been a makeshift workspace became a professional studio that reflected my growing graphic design career. The investment in my workspace coincided with exciting professional news. 2 weeks after the move out, Amanda called me into a virtual meeting with the agency's creative director. "Your work these past few weeks has shown remarkable creativity and focus," Amanda said. "We'd like to offer you the senior designer position on the Belridge account." It was a significant promotion with greater responsibility and a substantial pay increase. I couldn't help but wonder if this opportunity would have been possible had I still been working under the stress of my home situation. With my career advancing and my home truly mine again, I focused on financial security. I met with the same financial advisor who had helped me understand my property rights. "You're in an excellent position now," she confirmed as we reviewed my finances. "With the promotion and no dependents, you can increase your retirement contributions and still have a comfortable monthly budget." We discussed long-term planning investment options and even the possibility of eventually converting part of the house into a rental unit if I wanted additional income. The options were all mine to choose, which felt empowering after months of having my choices undermined. There was still the matter of Dad and Natalie. 2 weeks after moving out, Dad sent a text message. "Natalie found a house she loves, making an offer this week." I responded with a simple, "That's good news," unsure how to navigate our new strained relationship. A week later, he suggested meeting for coffee at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between my house and their temporary apartment. I agreed, my stomach knotting with anxiety as I parked outside the small coffee shop. Dad was already seated at a corner table, looking older and more tired than I remembered. He stood awkwardly when he saw me, as if unsure whether to hug me or shake my hand. We settled for an uncomfortable half embrace before sitting down. "You look well," he said, studying my face. "The house too. I drove by last weekend. The garden is coming back nicely." "I've been spending a lot of time there," I replied. "It helps me feel connected to Mom." A shadow passed over his face at the mention of my mother. Susan always did have a way with plants. Mine are already dying in pots on the apartment balcony. The conversation moved carefully around sensitive topics. Work, weather, distant relatives, until Dad finally addressed the elephant in the room. "I owe you an apology, Ella," he said. His coffee cup cradled between his palms. I didn't see what was happening. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. "What do you mean?" I asked, cautious but hopeful. "After you found those hidden items, I started noticing other things. How Natalie would steer conversations, make decisions without consulting me, isolate me from people she didn't approve of." He sighed deeply. "Including you. I tried to tell you," I said softly, "many times." He nodded. "I know, but after your mother died, I was so lost. Natalie seemed to know exactly what I needed, what to do next. It was easier to follow her lead than to think for myself, and when she became pregnant..." He trailed off, looking down at his hands. "You wanted a second chance at family," I finished for him. "Yes, but I forgot I already had a family. You." His eyes met mine, regret evident. "I'm sorry, Ella. Truly sorry." His apology wasn't perfect. It didn't address everything, particularly his failure to stand up for me at the gender reveal. But it was a start, an acknowledgement of wrongdoing that opened the door to possible reconciliation. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "Where do we go from here?" "That's up to you," he admitted. The house offer was accepted. "We'll be moving in next month. It's smaller than your place, but it has a yard and good schools nearby." "And Natalie," Dad's expression tightened slightly. "She's still upset. blames you entirely, but the pregnancy is going well and focusing on the new house has given her a project. I nodded unsurprised. And what about us, you and me? I'd like to repair our relationship if you're willing. Maybe regular coffees like this, small steps. It wasn't everything, but it was something a beginning. We agreed to meet again in 2 weeks, leaving the heavier conversations for future meetings when the wounds weren't quite so fresh. Setting boundaries proved crucial to rebuilding trust. I made it clear that while I was open to reconnecting with Dad, I needed time before interacting with Natalie again. I also established that any future relationship with my half-brother would need to be based on mutual respect, not grudging tolerance. Healing came from unexpected sources too. I joined a support group for adult children navigating family estrangement. Hearing others' stories of setting boundaries with parents and siblings helped me recognize that standing up for myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. Through the group, I met new friends who understood complicated family dynamics without judgment. Melissa, a woman whose mother had chosen an abusive stepfather over her safety, became a particular source of wisdom. Family relationships should have the same basic requirements as any relationship, she told me over lunch one day. Mutual respect, honesty, and care. Blood relation doesn't create an exception to those rules. 6 months after the move out, Dad visited the house alone, a milestone in our cautious reconciliation. He walked through the room, slowly noting the changes and restorations. "You've made it yours again," he observed, pausing before a newly hung photo of Mum and me at my college graduation. Susan would approve. In that moment, I saw real recognition in his eyes, an acknowledgement that this was my house, my sanctuary exactly as my mother had intended. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small envelope from his jacket. Inside was a more genuine apology letter acknowledging specific ways he had hurt me and failed to protect our relationship. The letter didn't excuse his behavior, but took full responsibility for his part in the conflict. "I've been talking to a therapist," he explained when he saw my surprise, trying to understand why I allowed things to go so wrong between us. It wasn't a magical fix, but it was meaningful progress. When he left that day, our hug was warmer, less awkward than before. When my half-brother was born in late October, I sent a gift, but declined the immediate hospital visit. Instead, I met the baby 2 weeks later on neutral ground, my aunt's house. Holding the tiny boy, I felt a complex mix of emotions, protection, affection, and lingering hurt. But none of it was his fault. Whatever happened between the adults, this child deserved to know his sister. Natalie remained cold during that visit, but made no openly hostile comments. Progress, however minimal, was still progress. 1 year after reclaiming my home, I hosted a housewarming party, the celebration I should have had when I first inherited the property. Friends from work, my support group, and even some family members filled the rooms with laughter and warmth. Jordan gave a toast that brought tears to my eyes. To Ella, who taught us all that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. And to this beautiful home, finally in the hands of the woman who was meant to have it. Dad attended briefly without Natalie bringing a potted plant for the garden. It was a peace lily, my mother's favourite. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. As guests mingled in the backyard, I found myself on Mum's porch swing, taking a moment alone. The journey of the past year had transformed me in ways I never expected. I'd discovered strength I didn't know I possessed, created boundaries I never thought I'd need, and built a community of chosen family who supported me unconditionally. My relationship with Dad remained a work in progress, more honest but still fragile. Whether Natalie and I would ever find common ground remained uncertain, but I had learned that family isn't defined solely by blood or legal ties. It's created through respect, support, and love, freely given, not demanded. Mum had known that all along. Her gift wasn't just the house itself, but the lesson in standing firm for what's rightfully yours. Sometimes the most loving choice isn't the easiest one. That night, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet again, I walked through each room, touching the familiar walls that had witnessed my greatest joys and deepest sorrows. This house would always carry the echoes of painful memories, but now it also held new ones of strength, boundaries, and self-respect. It was at last truly my home. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family members who took advantage of your kindness? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about maintaining boundaries, even with those closest to you. Remember that protecting what rightfully belongs to you isn't selfish. It's an act of self-respect that honors those who truly wanted the best for you. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to stand firm in your own life's challenges.